Hello everyone, and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time seeing me, my name is Emily and I make content about books. I have not sat down and recorded a video for YouTube in God knows how long, so please bear with me as we work out the kinks because I have a feeling it's going to take some time for me to get comfortable like in front of the camera again. I'm going to try my best. I figured since it is the start of September, what better time than now to go over all of the books that I read this summer. I think I have about 13 or 14 books to share with you guys today, and I'm gonna be honest, a ton of thrillers. So if that is something you're interested in listening to, sit down, get comfortable, and let's talk about all of the books that I read in summer of 2024. Book number 1, we have The Virgin Suicides. I gave this book a 2.5 out of 5. I wrote a little brief summary for all of the books I read, so I'm going to read them to you just because I'm anxious in front of the camera right now, and I feel better reading this to you. So get comfortable, listen to my little brief summary. In a suburban neighborhood in 1970, 5 sisters known as the Lisbon Sisters tragically end their lives. This story follows the point of view of the neighborhood boys who watched, worshipped, picked apart, and fantasized over them. With a 3.79 rating on Goodreads and tons of reviews praising the author for creating an equally beautiful and haunting read, I was very excited for this one. Here are my thoughts. I really appreciated the idea behind having these boys as a plural anonymous narrator. It lent to the idea of the female main characters, the Lisbon sisters, being this sort of mythical creature almost. Created this sharp contrast between what the girls really were and how they were seen in the male gaze. Loved that. I thought the author did an incredible job at creating that contrast. Kind of drives home the idea that the girls in life and in death were treated kind of as no more than like these almost extraterrestrial objects that were just there for the boys' entertainment, pleasure. I understood the author's message. I absolutely understood the message and it was well done, but something about it just feels icky coming from a male author, coming from somebody who hasn't experienced girlhood. Just felt a little bit off the mark that someone who didn't experience girlhood wrote this book. Book number 2, we have The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is one of my all-time favorite authors, so my excitement for this book was unmatched, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. Here is my brief summary. Taking place in the Spanish Golden Age, we follow our main character, Lucia Cotado, who uses magic to get through her days of work as a scullion for a shallow, middle-class couple. Her mistress discovers Lucia's ability and uses it to better the family's social position. Lucia is entered into a weird competition with other magic wielders for the attention of the nobility. While witchcraft is extremely taboo and feared, magic from religion seems to be praised? ? Lucia is trained by a million-year-old man who somehow becomes hot about a third way into the book. That's my description. Here are my thoughts. This was one of the most boring main characters ever, and the fact that it was written by Leigh Bardugo absolutely breaks my heart. I didn't really care about her. She felt really shallow, one dimension, not fleshed out, and the things that she didn't really add up. Also felt like the historical fiction aspect of this would have been a lot more interesting if we got a little bit more detail into like what was going on in the world, and we didn't. So I don't know, it just felt like a lot of really good ideas, a lot of really interesting characters on paper, but nothing really well fleshed out. So unfortunately, this book really wasn't that good for me. I enjoyed reading it. It just didn't really leave a mark on me, and I didn't really care for it. Book number 3, we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I loved this book. I gave this a 4 out of 5, and that is saying so much coming from me because I am really, really, really annoying when it comes to romances. I need it to be kind of like the background of a story in order for me to enjoy it. However, this one, chef's kiss, absolutely perfect. Here's my description. Justin and Emma are both cursed. Every person they date goes on to find their soulmate the second they break up. Eager and desperate to break their curses, the two decide to fake date in order to cancel out their curses. Emma is a traveling nurse and picks up and moves to Minnesota to live in a lake cabin, with her also traveling nurse best friend to be closer to Justin and give this dating scheme a chance. It's a corny plot, but it's done so well and it feels so real. So my thoughts are, what I wrote down was, wow, a golden retriever man who cares deeply for everyone in his life will do it for me every single time, which is so true. Like, I love a golden retriever male main character who is just like so emotionally aware of himself. Like, he has flaws, he makes mistakes, but he's so emotionally in tune. Love that. I also really, really loved that Abby Jimenez was able to tie in so many like familial issues and dynamics and just things that like the everyday person deals with, but it's not often showcased in romance or just in books in general. She was able to weave these kinds of everyday issues into the story to make it feel so real, and it was really powerful. Like, I loved this. It felt like a romance story, but like so much more. I love this book. Book number 4, another phenomenal read, is The Wedding People by Allison Espach. This is getting so much hype right now on social media, and for all the right reasons. I gave this one a 4 out of 5, and here is my little brief summary. Phoebe Stone arrives at the Grand Cornwall Inn dressed to the nines, all alone and bagless. She is mistaken for a member of the Wedding People and is thrown into the chaotic roller coaster of a week-long wedding celebration. Phoebe had wanted to come here for what felt like forever with her husband, but now she's here alone for reasons we do not know yet, and she's willing and ready to play the role of bridesmaid, groomsman, and everything in between to this rich, gorgeous couple. Sounds fun, right? Like, it's so fun, but it's also so incredibly deep, powerful. Like, check the trigger warnings. We deal with self-harm to the extreme in this book, and I think that the author does it in such a graceful and powerful way. It's such a heavy book, but at the same time it felt like such a breath of fresh air, and like, in one word, it just feels human. I loved the setting, I loved the characters. Every single scene served a purpose, and it was just so well done. It's the perfect combination of like chaotic scenes, heartfelt scenes, sad scenes. Like, it is just incredible. It's heavy hitting, but it's super digestible. Fantastic book. The next book we have, and one of my new all-time favorites, is Summer Sisters by Judy Blume. Can we take a second for this cover? Gorgeous. I'm just gonna read you the back. Okay. In the summer of 1977, Victoria Leonard's world changes forever when Caitlin Summers chooses her as a friend. Dazzling, reckless Caitlin welcomes Vix into the heart of her sprawling, eccentric family, opening doors to a world of unimaginable privilege, sweeping her away to vacations on Martha's Vineyard, an enchanting island where the two friends become summer sisters. That first paragraph alone sold me. I didn't need to read any more. I was sold. However, there's more. Now, years later, Vix is working in New York City. Caitlin is getting married on the vineyard, and the early magic of their long, complicated friendship has faded. But Caitlin begs Vix to come to her wedding to be her maid of honor. And Vix knows that she'll go, because she wants to understand what happened during that last shattering summer. And after all these years, she needs to know why her best friend, her summer sister, still has the power to break her heart. This book has so perfectly encapsulated the experience of female friendships starting in early childhood and extending over into adulthood, and I can't even like think about it for too much because I'll literally cry. It's so perfectly done. The things that these two girls go through over the decades makes you cry, makes you laugh, makes you hate one another. Like, you're so angry at what they do, but it's just so real. Like, it's so real, and we've all had a friend like Caitlin, and it's just like, it really hits home. So if you're looking for something that's coming of age, sort of, but not for somebody who's a teen, for somebody who's kind of gone through their teen years already, this book is absolutely perfect for you. And it's by Judy Blume. Judy Blume never misses. So, all right, the next book I'm going to talk about is My Dark Vanessa. This is by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Before I go into this, trigger warning, there's lots of mentions of SA, grooming, age gaps that are illegal. Like, just be warned before I go into this. I'll put the timestamps of when I'm done discussing this book, so you can skip forward if you don't want to hear about it, but just be warned going into it. It's heavy and it's scary. So here is the brief summary that I wrote down. 15-year-old Vanessa and 42-year-old Jacob Strain are having an affair. The relationship carries on well past Vanessa's 20s and into 2017 when we find Jacob Strain facing allegations of SA from a former student. Vanessa, groomed and taught to love this man since 15 years old, must come to terms with the idea that the man she once called her first love is not the good and kind man she was taught to believe he is. There's not much to... Actually, I'm lying. There's so much to say about this book. Not enough time in this video to sit down and tell you all of my thoughts. However, I did give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars because I thought that this was so incredibly done. It is a deep, tough, and painful book to read. Nonetheless, I feel this is a super important piece of literature. It explores the psychological dynamics of an abusive relationship. It's really just a deep dive into the trauma and effects left over from childhood abuse. The author does a fantastic job at demonstrating that trauma and guilt that our main character Vanessa carries well into her adulthood, and how she kind of portrays herself as being the cause of this whole entire storm. Definitely not a book for everyone, but if you are someone who can handle these kind of heavier topics and you would like to read about it, highly recommend. It's just something that you really have to be ready to pick up. Book number 7, we have Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. Let me read the back. Ruth Jefferson, a labor and delivery nurse, begins a routine checkup on a newborn, only to be told a few minutes later that she's been reassigned to another patient. The parents are white supremacists and don't want Ruth, who is African American, to touch their child. The hospital complies, but the next day the baby goes into cardiac distress while Ruth is alone in the nursery. Does she obey orders or does she intervene? Ruth hesitates before performing CPR and as a result is charged with a serious crime. Kennedy McQuarrie, a white public defender, takes her case, but Kennedy insists that mentioning race in the courtroom is not a winning strategy. Conflicted by Kennedy's counsel, Ruth tries to keep life as normal as possible, especially for her teenage son. As the trial moves forward, Ruth and Kennedy come to see that what they've been taught their whole lives about others and themselves might be wrong. This is a book that people with unchecked privilege should read. You feel me? Jodi Picoult mentions in the author's note that she did a ton of research going into this book, which I looked into before I started. I was really iffy on reading this book, at all, because of that. It just feels like you don't know that experience, so it's not your place to write it. However, after reading a lot of reviews and after reading the author's note saying how much research she did into it, I thought I'd give it a chance, and I'm really happy I did, because I've learned that this book seriously is kind of tackling issues with unrecognized racism. What this book does is it subtly calls out the prejudice that white people don't realize that their life is truly riddled with, and it kind of brings that to the forefront and makes you realize you're unchecked privileged. This is a book to check your privilege, and that's all. Book number 8, the awful worst book I read this summer. This is The Inmate by Freida McFadden. 1 star. One star. Here's my brief summary. Brooke Sullivan is a new nurse practitioner at a men's maximum security prison. She has a list of rules to follow and strict orders to never be friendly with the men. No one knows that Brooke is already intimately connected with Shane Nelson, a man with a bad reputation. The two were high school sweethearts until Shane was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Brooke was the one that testified against him, so why is she there? Here are my thoughts. I truly don't have much to say about this book, besides for the fact that Brooke might be the dumbest main character I've ever read in my whole entire life. We started off this book making choices, okay? She went to her first day of work, and remember, she is a nurse at a men's maximum security prison. She went to work in a pair of pumps. Okay, choice, but it just snowballs from there. Seriously, it just snowballs from there and gets worse and worse and worse. The storyline was so messy, the plot was so boring, and also I wanted to know so bad, and I still don't know the answer to this. If Brooke was so set that Shane was the murderer and that he was this awful person, why did she get a job there? She knew he was there. One of those books I just couldn't stand. I didn't like it. 1 star. Book number 9, another terrible read, is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I'm so upset I didn't like this book, but let me explain. So the story starts with a brutal murder in a small British village. Detective Jack Harper and newsreader Anna Andrews are both playing key roles in the investigation. When the detective becomes a suspect in his own investigation and finds Anna oddly entangled in the investigation herself, the two begin a The two begin a game of truth and lies to discover who the murderer is and why the two of them are involved. Sounds fun. Sounds like it could be a really good premise if you're looking for like a murder mystery thriller. However, this one just really immediately no. I was bored for the majority of this book until Alice Feeney decided to just throw every single triggering experience into this book in the span of like maybe 50 pages. Like, she just threw in these traumatic events just for the hell of it and for shock factor, and I hate that. It didn't add anything compelling to the plot at all, and the person who ended up being the killer was honestly just so incredibly random. Like, I laughed. I literally laughed. So it was just a giant question mark for me, and I don't understand how it has such high ratings because I thought it was so bad. Book number 10, we have The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. She's thick. Here is the description. With courage, grace, and powerful insight, best-selling author Kristin Hannah captures the epic panorama of World War II and illuminates an intimate part of history seldom seen, the Women's War. The Nightingale tells the stories of two sisters separated by years and experience, by ideals, passion, and circumstance, each embarking on her own dangerous path towards survival, love, and freedom in German-occupied, war-torn France. A heartbreakingly beautiful novel that celebrates the resilience of the human spirit and the durability of women. It is a novel for everyone, a novel for a lifetime. I also wrote a little description to make this sound a little bit more interesting to you because I feel like that description really doesn't tell you anything. I wrote, soon enough, Nazis have invaded our main character's small town and changed the world that she once knew. When a German officer requisitions at her home, she does everything she can to keep her daughter and herself out of his way. We also follow her sister Isabel, who is a rebellious 18-year-old who gets caught up in a rebellion fighting against the Nazis. I thought the dual POV of the historical fiction was perfect because a dual POV historical fiction will do it for me every single time. I love when historical fictions are able to blend true history with things like family dynamics, romance, drama, mysteries. I love when that's all blended together. Honestly, one of my favorite genres is historical fiction when it's done right, and this one was done right. This was a book that I have teardrops in. There are teardrops left in this book, so my tears will forever stay in this book. And I can't wait to read another and sob. So yeah, this was my very first Kristin Hannah book, believe it or not, and I am very excited to go through her backlist. The next book we have is Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth. This one got a 2.5 out of 5. Let me read you the description I wrote. Sisters Jessica, Nora, and Alicia were all rescued as young girls from troubled families and placed under the care of the seemingly loving Miss Fairchild. Living on an idyllic farming estate with horses and a pool, the girls arrive hoping for the best. As the story unwinds, we learn about Miss Fairchild's cruel punishments and overbearing rules. The three women, who are now adults, never want to think about their childhoods again and are doing a fairly well job at that until a body is discovered buried on the property and an investigation into their childhood ensues. This had all of the makings of an incredible thriller. It wasn't. It wasn't at all. This would have been such a better book if it was meant to be a literary fiction and we got a deep dive into this. However, it was just so weirdly done. Aside from the fact that this book was so boring, there were so many spelling errors. I was amazed. I don't think anybody proofread it before they published it. This felt like a really weird attempt at making an abusive childhood into a twisty thriller. That's why I feel like it would have done so much better as a drama, a literary fiction that actually proved a point. But this just felt like it was just triggering for the plot, and I didn't like it. The next book we have, and another 5-star, is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Here is the little description I wrote. When teenage Barbara disappears from her Adirondack summer camp and an investigation ensues, a cold case from years before is reopened. The summer camp is owned by Barbara's family, and they are not new to disappearances. 14 years prior, Barbara's older brother vanished, never to be found. As panic sets in, the race is on to find Barbara and solve her brother's case before it's too late. My thoughts on this book are that you need to stop this video right now and pick it up because oh my god, it was so good. This is the perfect combination of a mystery thriller drama. Perfect. We get multi-POVs, so we get to learn about what was happening on the campground off the campground, the detective's point of view, and it also is not in chronological order, which very hit or miss, but this one hit. It hit. We have a POV from a serial killer who escaped jail and is roaming the woods. We get the POV from the rich family who owns this property. We get the POV from the person who works on the summer camp land. We get the POVs from somebody who's at the summer camp. So good. I was so emotionally attached to the story and the characters. I will definitely be picking up more of her books because this was fantastic. Book 13, I have Strange Sally Diamond. This is by Liz Nugent. This was a 3 out of 5 stars. Pretty good. Sally Diamond was only doing what her father asked of her. She put him out with the trash when he died. Now she finds herself at the center of attention in her small village for something she can't quite comprehend. She never understood the horrors of her childhood and where she really came from until a teddy bear shows up at her home and opens a world of hurt for Sally. This book was weird. Very weird. The premise was interesting, and I needed to keep reading. It was one of those books where I think I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down. So that's always a bonus. But I did feel like the ending was a little bit rushed. And I also felt like there was like a character arc redemption coming. And that's really the opposite of what happened. So I was disappointed by that. It was a good book. You know what I mean? Like, it was a good book. I enjoyed it. There were some things I wish were better. The ending. But yeah, I don't regret reading it. It was a good book. I'd recommend it. Not my favorite. Just a good book. Book number 14 is The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. My description that I wrote is, set in a wellness resort in the middle of the woods, this multi-POV thriller follows guests, owners, and locals as the resort prepares for opening weekend and the aftermath. There are secrets and lies circulating the resort and old faces that have come to haunt the present. I am not going to give you my thoughts on this one because me and my best friend, who started our very own podcast, which I will link somewhere over here and in the description, we spent a whole entire episode talking about this book. So if you read this and you want to hear us talk about it for like an hour, go check out the podcast. We do make episodes every week. We release Mondays at 7 a.m. and it is literally about all things books. So if you're interested, go check that out on Spotify. Like I said, linked down below. It is called Let's Talk Literature, and it is me and my best friend Will, and it is a great time. The last book I have to share, Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Ayamide. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Here's my description. Sade Hussein is starting her 3rd year of high school as the new girl at an exclusive and dark boarding school. It gives dark academia, like to the max. Her roommate seems fine enough until she ends up vanishing and leaves her best friend and Sade to solve her disappearance. Haunted by the past, Sade takes matters into her own hands to figure out where her roommate went and to uncover the dark secrets that lie at Alfred Noble Academy. I love this book so much, but unfortunately, like The Midnight Feast, I talked about this book in my podcast, so I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger, and you're going to have to check out the podcast in order to hear what I thought about it, but I loved it. This one was much better than The Midnight Feast. So we talk a lot about the aspects of like dark academia and how perfect it is for the fall time. So if you're somebody who's interested in getting into that kind of genre for the fall, definitely check out the podcast. So that wraps it up for today, guys. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and listening to me ramble about books. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some book recs. If not, I hope you just relaxed. I will be back very soon, I promise, for a fall TBR and fall book recs video, so stay tuned for that, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.